societal issue. No matter how it is defined, it can be agreed that it is an issue that requires everyone's attention. It is important that all members of our society work together to provide the opportunities for all our members to reach their full potential. It helps all of us to help one another.
Poverty has many faces, changing from place to place and across time, and can be described in many ways. Most of the time, poverty is a situation people want to escape. So poverty is a call to action for the poor and the wealthy alike, a call to change the world so that many more may have enough to eat, adequate shelter, access to education and health, protection from violence, and a voice in what happens in their communities. When people are excluded within a society and not well educated, there are negative consequences. Pay the price for poverty, meaning it causes increases of cost in the health system, the justice system, and other systems that provide support to those living in poverty.
Poverty is not having enough money to meet basic needs, including food, clothing, and shelter. Poverty can be seen in many ways. For example, it can be hunger or it can be lack of shelter.
From the wreckage.
What are the main causes of poverty? The instances that account for the most people. Well, the main reason is history. Significant historical situations, mainly slavery and wars. Following up is political instability, where politicians and those who make executive decisions fail to come up with policies that benefit the majority of people of their country, and usually are pushed by the one percenters. Next is national debt, which is caused by mostly developed countries who owe large sums of money to wealthier nations and institutions. Following it is discrimination and social equality. This has greatly been reduced in the modern era, but we still see examples of it. What this does is prevent certain groups from having access to resources, basic social services, and opportunities, which in turn can produce no benefits. And lastly, we have natural disasters. Haiti, Japan, Sri Lanka, and even the USA have had its fair share of natural disasters that have crippled economies, took hundreds of thousands of lives, and obliterated homes and public properties. These are some of the multitude of reasons that cause and maintain poverty.
Don't make no difference.
People struggle with money, not just in America but throughout the world, meaning that poverty is a problem on a macro level. The World Bank defines poverty as living on anything less than $1.90 a day. In 2015, there were 43.1 million people living in poverty in the United States. The official rate was 13.5%. 10.6 million died in 2003 before they reached the age of 5 due to poverty in the US. The World Bank projects that the number of people living in poverty is 702 million people in 2015, or about 9.6% of the global population.
Throughout the world, 640 million live without adequate shelter.
400 million have no access to safe water.
270 million have no access to health services.
Think about how you live day by day. Now think about how people in poverty live their daily life. People need to open up their views and expand their knowledge. Just because you don't deal without does not mean you shouldn't worry about it. Everyone can make a change. Poverty is on a macro level. Even though some countries have more poverty than others, it overall still exists. One person in poverty is still too much. It is no lie that poverty has always been a serious issue, and it only seems to be getting worse. But like every problem, there is always a solution. The possible solutions for poverty clearly depend on what is chiefly causing it, and this can clearly vary with time and with place.
The first requirement is to convince the richer countries that they will benefit by abolishing poverty worldwide. Having poor countries is not an economic benefit to anybody, and it chiefly encourages low productivity in the richer countries by their employing or exploiting in the lowest wage poor countries. Rich countries sometimes feel that by giving food to poorer countries, they are solving the issue, but that is not the case. Food aid alone may not reduce poverty at all in the longer term. Richer countries, governments, and charities who want to help poorer countries really need to help more closely study the actual needs of each poor country. If richer countries can be taught correctly the real problems of accepting poverty, then it is in principle a relatively simple matter for governments of rich and poor countries together to gradually end poverty worldwide with improving international trade terms and international government and charities aid systems.
Ways of solving poverty don't only include getting help from others who have a bigger benefit. The people directly affected by the problems or issues of poverty in the community have to be actively and authentically participating in the efforts to fight poverty. These people can start creating organized groups within the community to help each other rather than working with a few individuals. Once these groups are set up, the main issues need to be identified. For example, who needs the most help? Who's willing to donate food? Who is willing to donate essentials? What organizations can be gone to ask for help, etc. Sometimes those people in poverty can address and solve their own issues and they don't even know it. Nowadays, there are many nonprofit organizations that mainly focus on helping those in poverty. But if people don't reach out to them, then they'll never be able to help.
When in poverty, you can never lose hope.
The
Classic figures of sociology like Max Weber, Emile Durkheim, and Auguste Comte did not write much about poverty. However, concern with the poverty exists in the work of Karl Marx. In recent decades, sociological poverty research has probably been the most active among those studying race in cities in the United States and among those examining cross-national differences in welfare states. In 2010s and 2020s, it is likely there will be growing pressure to shift sociological attention away from disproportionately studying urban poverty in the United States.
According to the Marxist view, the major cause of poverty is inequality or uneven distribution of wealth and income, a main consequence of capitalism. There is a considerable controversy about poverty and its relationship with equality. From one point of view, poverty is more likely to occur in a society which accepts inequality. Sociologists who adopt a relative definition of poverty accept that for the eradication of poverty, it is necessary to first abolish all inequality in income.
On the other hand, there are scholars who do not find any relationship between poverty and inequality. A wealthy businessman and well-paid government official or teachers may be materially unequal, but the teacher or official are not poor. Thus, poverty and inequality are not the same. Social inequality means that certain individuals or groups have more material or cultural resources than others, whereas poverty implies some insufficiency in the material or cultural resources of an individual or group. Poverty is an absolute concept, while inequality is a relative one. It is possible for poverty or headcount ratios to decline so that everyone is better off, while inequality simultaneously increases because income growth for richer segments is relatively low.
Ronald Reagan famously said, "We have fought a war on poverty and poverty won." With 46 million Americans, 50% of the population now counted as poor. It's tempting to think he may have been right. No matter all of the effort that has been put into ending poverty, it will continue to exist. This is a relative comparison within a given society where you will have similar groups competing for economic resources or means to generate wealth. Poverty exists because of two things. The first being the lack of skills or education relative to the relative population at large. This is a relative comparison within a given society where you will have similar groups competing for economic resources in the means to generate wealth. It denies those in poverty the means to better themselves over time. The second thing is a displacement due to external factors such as war or weather. Wars and drought cause a great deal of human population displacement and can bring about severe negative impact to the person's means to generate income or provide for their family.
An astonishing number of people work at low-wage jobs. Plus, many more households are headed now by a single parent, making it difficult for them to earn a living income from the jobs that are typically
The near disappearance of cash assistance for low-income mothers and children, welfare, and much of the country plays a contributing role too.
And persistent issues of race and gender mean higher poverty among minorities and families headed by single mothers.
A sociological problem would be a theoretical issue. A social problem is a dilemma a society faces which would be of concern to sociologists. Poverty is a social problem because its effects are felt in society as a whole.
According to structural functionalists, stratification and inequality are actually constructive phenomena that benefit society. Because of this, inequality ensures that the most functionally important jobs are filled by the best qualified people. Conflict theorists argue that stratification is dysfunctional and harmful to society, that it results in competition between the rich and poor as individuals and act for their own economic advantage. They hold that competition and equality are not inevitable, but are created and maintained by people trying to gain access from scarce resources. They say that economic problems are the main issue of poverty. It posits the existence of a poverty sector in the economy whose problems can be alleviated through economic growth, increased investments, creation of jobs, and higher income. The dominant discourse in development possesses an obstacle to the eradication of poverty because it contributes to the creation of scarcity and conceals how those mechanisms function, thereby disempowering the poor and misleading the people of goodwill.
Both positivists and interpretivists believe that it is possible to collect objective data to make it reliable and validate its statements about behavior. Postmodernism is slightly different in that it is not a scientific methodology. Postmodernists would create stories or possible scenarios to try and explain poverty. An interpretivist or positivist would actually go around the world and collect data from people in poverty to find an overall cause. We should be able to envision a world without poverty quite easily. Just think back to when humans had to hunt and gather on the savannah throughout most of history as species. But of course, this is not appealing thought for the 21st century and the global civilization that brings us so many wonders of what we have now, like medicine, the ability to travel, a vast variety of foods and cultures to explore, etc. So we still have a challenge of envisioning the great complexities of social life today without any hint of chronic poverty.
Luckily, the way to have a world without poverty can be found in the same antiquities from which we If we were to implement that idea into the 21st century, then it would be more sophisticated. Humans got to the present by acting out our cooperative social morality. We are still genetically very much the same as we were when this innate psychological capacity evolved in our ancestral lines. And so we can take the many findings from human evolution and apply them to the present to start building a new world without poverty. We have to bring chronic inequality to an end by radically transforming the paradigms of finance and political power. In other words, change the way we sanction moral behavior as a society, before we have any hope of bringing global poverty to an end.
A world without poverty would need to have organic society. An organic society is a type of social solidarity characteristic of industrial societies in which people are bound together by what they do. For example, in a world without poverty, there would be more of a focus on making sure that everyone has a job. If everyone has a job, then they should have the money to support themselves. But we also need to take into consideration that nowadays, there are still people who have jobs that are in poverty. In order to avoid that, everyone would end up making the same amount. This may not make everyone content, but in the end, it is what is fair. Each individual would be able to do whatever job they want because they wouldn't need to worry about trying to find a job that makes them more money than another.
Diversity also plays a big role. Nowadays, discrimination against women, Hispanics, African Americans, and much more, for example, still exists. These people tend to be paid less and treated like they're inferior. In a world where people make the same amount of money, this would not be as big of an issue. Children would not need to worry because their parents would be able to make enough money to put them through a good education. Each child will be able to focus on a certain career that they have a passion for, instead of trying to find one or being forced into one where they'll make more money. Overall, at first people will not agree that everyone should be making the same amount of money, but over time they'll hopefully realize that it's better to have a world without poverty than a world with different social classes.
It is better for everyone to be able to support their needs than to have certain people living a comfortable life and others dying of starvation and health issues.
It is better to live in a world without poverty, and in order to achieve that, people need to agree to not be so egotistic and instead be more considerate.